Imagine finding your birth family, then wishing you never had. Hello and welcome back to Not Made in China, the podcast sharing unfiltered conversations about adoption and the beautiful madness that comes with it. I'm your host, Shaosheen, and today I'm joined by Sophie, a Chinese-American adoptee. We talk about the challenging reality of reconnecting with her birth family and why, at one point, she wished she'd never found them. We also talk about growing up adopted, navigating identity and cultural disconnection, and discovering her true birthday and siblings. We also explore why boundaries, therapy, and self-awareness have been so important in helping her navigate such a complex journey. Sophie's story is honest, challenging, and a powerful reminder that every adoptee's experience is just so different. I'm very grateful to her for trusting me with her story, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, without further ado, let's jump into it, and I hope you enjoy eavesdropping on our conversation. So Sophie, welcome to Not Made in China, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, to dive right into it, I know, of course, you're adopted from China, and I know you mentioned you spent a good deal of time in the orphanage. Can you share a bit about your early life in China and what you know about that time in the orphanage?
Yeah, for totally. So I was in the orphanage for 10 months of my life, where then I got adopted by a white family. And when they first got me, I had bronchitis and I had scabies. So they had to, have all the medications and stuff ready to go. So right off the bat, had some issues from the orphanage.
And can you tell me a bit about the time you had in the orphanage and what you were told about that time growing up?
I was told that the orphanage, they had stuff that they were doing that probably was not normal. They would wrap the babies up in a lot of layers. And so the babies were all overheated, and that they also would have timers on like feeding times, and that if you didn't finish your bottle or food, you just weren't able to eat.
That sounds horrific. And how did you find out about that?
Through my mom. She told me when I was at an older age and told me the stuff that was going down in the orphanage.
Gosh, that must have been so difficult for her to have to retell to you. And also, how do you know when the right moment to discuss something like that really is?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that we started talking about the orphanage and my adoption probably around middle school. And that's just kind of was the time that I started wanting to know more about my past and wanting to know about where I came from. And so I think that's when the conversation started.
When you were a bit younger, was adoption quite an open topic in the household, or was it only really as you got older that you got into it a little bit more?
No, I mean, adoption was always an open topic in my family. I think that also I'm come from a white family. So I think I was never under the impression that I was biological. I think that I was just they never sat down and was like, you're adopted. I just kind of always knew, and that there was something different with me. Yeah.
And I know you just mentioned there was a bit of a time when you suddenly started thinking more about your origins. Was there a moment that perhaps triggered that, or was it just a part of getting older?
I think that was just a part of me getting older. I remember growing up, I would get stared down at grocery stores, and I've had people come up to me and ask me my adoption or oh, you're adopted, stuff like that. So I think I always wanted to know more, but it wasn't until I think I got older that I was actually curious.
And when you were growing up, were there many other Chinese people around you or any other adoptees?
For the most part that I can recall, no. I was probably in my friend group, I was the only adopted child. And I think for the most part growing up, I didn't really know anyone that was also adopted. I think that once I got to middle school, there were a couple other people that were adopted, but not Chinese adopted.
That's interesting. And I guess all of us adoptees, we land in such different countries and everyone has such different versions of representation around them growing up.
No, yeah, totally. So yeah, I didn't know anyone that had similar stories or that were Asian oriented.
Did you find that challenging at all, or was it just the norm?
I think it was somewhat challenging because it's I didn't know. I mean, I think that I kind of grew up surrounded with the idea that also through friends and meeting other Asian people that it was like I was too white for the Asians and I was too Asian for white people. So it was just like it was an interesting dynamic of trying to find and figure out where I fit in the most.
For sure, it's such a difficult one when you're kind of caught between two cultures. And then if you layer on top of that the fact you might not have so many other people going through the same thing, then you kind of
Yeah.
have no points of reference. So that must have been, yeah, that must have been really challenging to navigate. Another thing I'd love to speak to you about is how you ended up reconnecting with your birth family. Can you talk me through how you first started searching or how you first came across them?
So I was in middle school where my mom and I, that's when I started realizing, I want to learn more about my past, stuff like that. And it was kind of an unsaid rule in my family that I wasn't able to do that until the age of 18. So it was pretty limited on how much I could find out at that point. And my mom spoke to like a private investigator who goes around China and figures out like how much an orphanage is reliable and on the information that they're told and can you trust them and stuff. And we went through him and we found out that my orphanage, so on the ranking, 10 being like you can't trust them at all, and then 0 being you can trust them, they're trustworthy and stuff. Mine got a 9.5, which was one of the higher rankings of the orphanages being not trustful. And so I was told at a very young age that I was found on a bridge and taken straight to the orphanage from like a police officer with like nothing on me and no like reason on like why I was abandoned and stuff. And so that was just the reason I was told. And so then finding out that like you can't trust them, I was like, okay, so what now? But then after that kind of just like went over my head and was like, okay, it's okay that like I don't really know what's going on with me, but I respect my parents' wishes of like not knowing until 18. And so I just kind of lived my life normally. And then when I got to high school freshman year, my mom follows a lot of adopted Facebook groups, and they help reconnect adoptees to their biological parents. And I came across one of the ads one day, and it had my adopted name that the orphanage gave me, and my birthday, and the orphanage I was actually from. And I ran over to my mom and I was like, this sounds like me. It's all the right information. I mean, this sounds really suspicious that it could be me. And my mom's like, yeah, I mean, it could be you at this point. Like, we just don't know. And at that point, I was like 15, 16. So it was definitely not the time that I was 18. And I had a long discussion with my parents, like, should we do this? Should we do the DNA test? And we decided ultimately that I would do the DNA test. 2 weeks later, I got the match that it was in fact, my biological mom was reaching out. And so then it kind of, from there, like, almost became a blur. We started communication with my biological mom through the researchers because, there's a great language barrier. And she told us to both write letters to each other to help the communication start. And even my mom wrote one to her, like, I guess, like, they wanted, like, a mom and mom letter, too, just for the communication to start. And when I first received the letter from her, it was honestly, like, I forget most of the contents of the letter, but it, like, had the lines of, I hope you can forgive me. I would love for you to call me mom, but I know I don't deserve that right. And just saying, like, I love you very much. And so it was really interesting to, like, hear this woman haven't spoke to 16 years, 15 years, and say, like, I want you to call me mom and say I love you. And so throughout that time, it was interesting to navigate it because it was finals week as a freshman in high school. So it's just kind of like a lot to handle. And then it was also my birthday coming up. And through the communication, we actually found out that my birthday was not my birthday. We found out that the orphanage told me a different date. In reality, I was told it was June 10th. So for 15 years, I was celebrating June 10th. Once I started communicating with my birth mom, she said it's actually June 11th. So that was like a very big shock to find out that like the day that you were born actually was not the day you were born. And I also found out that through the communication, I found out that I had 2 biological siblings. who actually did not know about me until we actually started communicating.
Gosh.
And I have an older sister and a younger brother. So that was also really interesting to, figure out and navigate through that as a freshman.
Of course, it's a huge amount to take on. And when you had that initial letter from your mother saying, oh, asking you to call her mum and telling her that she loved you, how did that make you feel, if you can even remember, because it must have been such an intense moment?
I think that like my initial thought was just like what do you want me to do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually in my college essay I said that mother is a verb, and I said that there's more to being a mother than just you coming from your mom. It's like what you do to earn that title. So my mom taught me everything I know. She was there for my first steps. She was there for when I cried when I didn't get like the stage managing job that I wanted, and she was there for when I got a bad grade in high school or middle school, or like friendship breakups and stuff. Like she was there through all of it, through when I was really sick. And so then hearing this woman say, I want you to call me mom, I was just like, you didn't do anything to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the initial thought, I was just like, I can't do that. Like I can't call you that.
Yeah,
Nor could I say I love you to her because it was just
of
like a
course.
stranger. So I think it was just trying to like respect her wishes, but I just couldn't go through with saying I love you or calling her mom throughout the communicating, like throughout the time that I had contact with her.
That's completely understandable. But it's like, yeah, you have to remember,
Yeah,
exactly as you said, these are most of the time complete strangers. And it would feel so jarring to call a woman mum who hasn't been the one who's stepped into the role as being your mother, and to tell someone
yeah.
you love them when you haven't actually met them. So how do you even know? So that it must have been a very strange thing for you to have to read.
Yeah, it was definitely strange. And then like once we started, then once we did the letters, the researcher said, now you can start video calling. Like I'll be there to translate. And so we started that way as communicating. And it was, I think, June 9th or June 10th. And they're like, we want to do a video call. And because of the time difference, my mom and I stayed up till like 11 to do this phone call with them. And I got on, and I thought it was just going to be like a one-on-one conversation with my birth mom. It was not, in fact, that. It was the researcher, my birth mom, my biological brother, my biological sister, and like other family members. And it was like this supposed to be this like big reunion. And so it was definitely very like overwhelming of thinking, okay, this is gonna be a nice sit down conversation. I can find out more about my past. And it was just really overwhelming. And the entire time I remember in the call, my birth mom was just crying hysterically in the corner. Like she's not even talking to me.
Wow.
And just crying. And it was like supposed to be like a celebration for I was turning 16 at the time. So it was supposed to be also like a celebration of my birthday. And so she's crying in the background. And I remember my biological brother was like playing happy birthday in the background. It was just a very overwhelming
Yeah.
conversation. I think it only lasted like 20 minutes because I was like, okay, this is with the language barrier too. I was like, this is really overwhelming. I did not expect to meet like an aunt and uncle and also my birth siblings that had no idea that it existed until like a couple days before. So that call ended very fast. And I remember after the call, I was just like, I started laughing to my mom. I was like, this is ridiculous that this woman who's supposed to be my mom, like my biological mom, is just crying in the corner. And I really felt like I had to be the parent in that situation because it was like, um, I'm 16 years old and you're crying in the corner for what you did to me. And somehow, like, you're playing the victim card. And so it was really interesting just being like, so I was just telling my mom, was like, this isn't just insane. Like, you're playing the victim, you're playing the child, and I'm having to step up in the role of the adult, which I don't think any child should be going through, let alone, you can be calm and collected. Like, I know it's a difficult situation for all of us, but, like act your age almost. It was just, I was very frustrated. So I was just like, kind of like, just act your age. And so it's just a very frustrating call.
It's completely understandable to feel that way. And it must have just been so bizarre on so many levels. And there's so much to process within that.
No, I mean, it was very frustrating, and so we didn't call for a while. We just texted, and then also I got to get to know my biological sister a little bit more. She's 2 years older than me, so she was around like 18, 17 at the time. She was about to, go to a university and all of that. So it was also really interesting to navigate my relationships with my biological siblings because, again, we both did not know we existed. And then just to be kind of put both in that scene. And I remember we talked about that specifically and being like, I didn't know you existed. You didn't know I was existing. So it was that was really interesting. And then the research lady who helped us get in touch was like, okay, they want to do another Zoom call. Like, we should set that up if you would like to. And I was like, okay, I guess we can do that. And again, it was us, though, navigating through their time zones. And I think throughout that whole process, my mom and I were very willing to work with their time zones, but they weren't willing to work with ours,
Really?
which I thought that was a very interesting concept because we were always the ones having to stay up late, like 11 and midnight, to talk to them. And throughout the entire time that we ever did the calls, they wouldn't be like, okay, what times work best for you? And so that was really interesting. And I get the language barrier and stuff, but we had the research lady to help us. So just knowing that they wouldn't navigate through their time zone and work with us was also difficult. And so I remember the second time we called, and it was probably the last time I actually was on like a video call with them. It was the same kind of concept. I was ambushed now by like the aunt, the uncle, my biological mom, the siblings, and now some cousins, and then also my grandma-in-law. And so that call got very interesting because it was a normal call. The research lady was helping us, translate. And then the grandma-in-law decided to start speaking and was like, you should be grateful. Starting ambushing me in front of all of these biological family members and my mom, and was just basically like, you should be grateful that what happened to you. You're in a better life now. You are thriving. Look at you now. Like, you seem to be doing so well with this family. And was just like basically ambushing me to forgive all of them for what happened to me. And that, I think, just drew the line of like the most uncomfortable feeling in me, because it's also like the research lady is telling me it, not even because, the language barrier. So I'm hearing this, I need to forgive them, through a lady who doesn't know me at all. And I think that just drew the line of like, I can't do this anymore. And I think right after that, we ended the call. And I remember like crying to my mom after that. I'm just like, I can't believe I just got ambushed. Basically saying I should be grateful for getting abandoned. Because it was also learned that through my biological mom, she told me that it wasn't her that wanted to leave me. But at the time that I was born, China was implementing the two-child law. So my mom had my biological sister, and then they had me, which then at that point was two kids. And as many people know, in Asian culture, the guy takes the family name and they take care of the elders. And so my grandmother-in-law was like, this is not happening. I'm not going to have someone to take care of me. You need to get rid of her. And so apparently my biological mom knew someone at the orphanage. And so she actually handed me directly to the orphanage directors. And so there was no bridge involved or anything like that. That was just some hocus pocus made by the orphanage. Yeah, so she left me at the orphanage. And then 2 years later, she had a biological son. So the grandmother-in-law got what she wanted. So I think that it was just very ironic that the grandmother-in-law was the one that was ambushing me, because she was the one that wanted me gone.
Incredibly ironic, and such how dare she say that, to be honest. And how did it make you feel when you heard this translation coming through saying you should be grateful for everything that we put you through, and then to also learn that it was her who wanted your mother to give you up in the first place? How did that make you feel?
I mean, it definitely hurt because it was like I was, again, not expecting to meet more family members, and then getting put in a room with this woman who was the reason that wanted me gone. And just like the audacity of like her being like, you should be grateful. I'm very grateful that I have an amazing family. But I don't think that should be the ultimate reason of, yay, you got abandoned by your biological parents. You went through years and years of bullying. You didn't know where you came from. You didn't know any of your, health issues, like, biological health issues. You didn't know, like, you're never going to know any of that. And so just like the concept of being like, well, you should be grateful for all of that. I just think that was a really insensitive thing to say, just because it's like, you didn't know I'm very grateful, but you never knew, and you never will know what I went through growing up. So it's just like really, it was interesting just to hear someone say, just be grateful that, you're thriving. But I mean, it took years and years to thrive and to be okay with my story. And so for someone else to then be like, you should be grateful, especially coming from her, was definitely interesting.
For sure. And also, I think it's important to acknowledge that one of the reasons you're thriving is because of you and the work that you've put in and of who you are as a person. So it seems confusing that she tried to take credit for the fact you're thriving. Of course, I know a lot of people can say, oh, but if they hadn't done that, then this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. That might be the case. But
Yeah.
the point is, they did what they did, and you're thriving because of the things that happened after that, not because of what they did. So it feels very unfair for her to claim that.
No, I mean, like, totally. I think it goes back to that saying, which I think, in my opinion, I just don't believe. It's like the everything happens for a reason saying. And I think I've always been told that, like, everything happens for a reason, Sophie. Like, I've been told by other people, not even just by like my grandmother-in-law, to be grateful, and that like everything happens for a reason, and that, like, you're so loved now. And it's just so interesting because it's like, that's just not a typical thing you say. Like, yes, I am very grateful, but you don't say that to a biological kid.
Exactly.
So it's just, I think it's a really interesting way to kind of sympathize, and to be empathetic, but you don't really know what to say in these situations. So you're like, well, everything happens for a reason. Like, you should be grateful that you got lucky and you have an amazing family. But again, you don't say that to a biological kid. You're just like, yay, you came into this family. So it's just like the difference between biological kids and adopted kids.
Huge difference. Yeah, this grateful and lucky narrative is one that gets thrown around far too much. And I think people forget that there's so much nuance there. Yes, we can be grateful for things that have happened in our lives. We can be grateful if we've had wonderful parents and for opportunities and for who we are. Of course, like, we can be grateful for that if we choose to be. But then to be forced to be grateful for the really traumatic part at the start that we had no choice over just feels really, really unfair.
I mean, totally. I think that also, like, another thing that gets thrown around a lot while being adopted, or even foster care kids, I'm sure hear it. It's like, you got a second chance. Like, you got the second chance to, thrive and stuff. And I think that's just bogus, because it wasn't a second chance. Whether you're a foster care kid or adopted, you didn't get that first chance to have a great life and to thrive. Like, you got a crappy beginning, and you then got to actually have a normal life. So whenever, like, I hear that, you got that second chance, I just don't think that's the reality of it, because you're getting that first chance. You never got your first chance to, live a normal life. And so I think it's just interesting with that, all those type of sayings that come with being adopted or foster care kid. It's just like the second chance, be grateful, all that language around it. It's just very interesting.
It really is. And it also comes with an assumption that if you're adopted into a Western family, then your life is instantly going to be 10 times better, and that being better off economically equals happiness and equals fulfillment and equals all these things, which in many cases it might do, but it depends on the specific family, and you absolutely can't assume. And I think by people using the lucky, grateful, second chance narratives, it does very much diminish some of the very, very real things we do have to navigate as adoptees. And even if we have the most perfect, wonderful parents, adoption still affects you, and it's really important to acknowledge that is something traumatic that's happened, and it will affect you no matter how wonderful or beautiful your childhood might have been.
No, totally. Yeah. So I think that's just, the whole narratives of it all. And I think that's why, like, I know that at least that, like, I know other people now that are adopted, and I know that I'm very open about my adoption, and I also know people that are very, like, closed off when it comes to adoption. And I am someone that very much advocates. I've done other panels and, like, other podcasts just because I think that, like, it's so important to also to spread awareness about what went down in China during those times with the one child policy or two child policy rule, um, and just how much it actually affected people. Because I think that even, like, growing up, not a lot of people actually knew about the one child policy. And, when they found out that I was, like, I guess, a result from that is just, very unique, because it's like I had to explain the whole process. I had to explain what went down, because I just don't think, middle school, elementary school, like, people don't, at least in, the US, they don't teach you any of that. So, like, no one really knew what that was until I brought it up.
That's such a good point. And it must be, well, how did you feel? Did you feel it was quite, like, sort of tiring having to explain it over and over again?
I'm very open with, my story and, like, where I come from. And so I'm always open to people asking questions. I think that as long as you're respectful, I think that also, like, another narrative that gets thrown around a lot with telling my adoption story is your real parents, your blood, and that concept of, like, oh, well, now you know where your real parents are, now you know who you really came from, now you know your real blood, and all that concept. I think that it was just, that's always been told to me, like, where are your real parents? My real parents are right now next to me, like, standing in the other room. And so I just think that it's crazy that, like, the whole concept of saying real was just, I always was offended by that, because the real parents are the ones that raised me, and we're playing that logic. They were the ones that raised me. They were the ones that always took care of me. So whenever, like, I'm always, like, correcting people, I'm like, okay, if you want to ask me questions, I'm so okay answering them, but let's maybe use biological versus adopted, and those type of words that are sensitive to the situation, and not just straight up being like, okay, well, we're your real parents, or are you mad that, you don't have their DNA and their blood in you, and, like, they're my chosen family, like, that is family. So it's just kind of explaining chosen family versus, I guess, family, and also realizing that, like, the people that raise you are your family, whether it's blood, whether it's DNA, it doesn't matter, like. So I think it's just navigating through those terms, because I think also a lot of people are uneducated on that type of, like, scenarios and those situations, and so, like, they're just uneducated. So I know that some they don't come ill-intended, but it's just fixing their language. And I know that I've also had people kind of comment on my adoption story with an ill intent towards it, and that they were just being nosy and rude about it. Like, I remember one time I was in Macy's with my mom shopping for, like, a dress, and we were checking out, and the checker outer lady, I guess, she just straight up said, "You don't look like her. Like, she doesn't look like you," to me and my mom. And I was just like, what? Like, we don't look like each other? Like, thank you for stating the obvious. Let's do your job, though. You're there I'm here to pay for a dress. And I just remember being so, like, taken back. I'm like, what? Like, thank you so much for stating the obvious. Like, I don't need you to tell me that, I'm staring at a white lady and an Asian daughter. Like, that's, you are really Sherlock Holmes. I was just like, what? Like, what do you want a cookie? So I think that there's been times where it's just like, those are those situations where definitely, I think, more ill intent of just, like, you want to be nosy, you want to be rude, and then you have people in your life that just want to know, and they're curious. But then it's also just fixing the different language you use, or correcting them on how they navigate through that, and asking in a polite way. Because I'm very open to it, but I also know that there are a lot of people that don't want to share their adoption story, or don't want to go into details with it. So it's just, like, being respectful. So I think that it's important to teach people how to go about that.
Absolutely. I think you make such a good point around language, and just a few tweaks, like, instead of saying real parents, you use biological parents. Those things make such a big difference. And I feel like that's massively underestimated, because no one's expecting you to go and, do loads of research and understand the nuance of adoption straight off the bat. But if you can just make the effort to tweak a few little words here and there, that is so powerful in the long run. And if more people can do that, then I think that could really make a real difference. I'd be really interested to know a little bit more about your biological siblings, because I know you said that neither of you, or none of you, knew each other. Well, they didn't know you existed, you didn't know they existed. What was their reaction when they found out about you?
I think we were all in shock. I mean, so I am in the middle child, like with my parents actually here, like my adopted family. I'm the middle child, and I'm the middle child actually with my biological sibling. So I kind of made a joke to my parents. I was like, I think I got destined to be the middle child. And I also like never had a biological sister because I have two brothers. And so just like that concept of now navigating that I have a younger brother and an older sister, just it shocked me because I was like, I only grew up with brothers. So just like the entire idea of like, wait, I have a biological sister and a younger brother. So interesting. But I mean, I think that we tried our best to communicate. I never blamed them. I never had any like hatred towards my biological siblings. They knew nothing. I knew nothing. So it was not fair to be mad at them because they weren't the ones that did the actions. And so I think the biggest part of why we just were never able to stay in touch was the language barrier. I mean, we used the app like WhatsApp and it worked for a while, but it wasn't consistent enough because also the time zones, and she was, starting university and stuff like that. And so we didn't have time to actually have times to chat. And my biological younger brother, I don't think we actually even chatted. I think it was like the one time I talked to him was on the video call. So I really never got to know them that well. But it was like nothing ever against them. I was never mad at them. I think it's just more so the language barrier and that we're just very different people. That the reason why it didn't work out was just communication and also the language barrier.
So understandable. And where does your relationship stand with your biological family today?
So I actually never met or talked to my biological father. I don't actually know if my biological mom and father are still together. And through the entire communication, he never was on the video calls. He never had any communication to me. So I don't know if they were divorced or something happened to him. So I don't really know anything about him. My relationship with my siblings is also non-existent, and also with my birth mom. We after the last video call, after the ambush, we chatted for a couple more months, and then she kind of fell into the cycle of ghosting me, and then wanting to come back, and then ghosting me, and then wanting to come back, and then ghosting me. And I mean, throughout high school, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I am trying to focus on my future. I'm trying to get in a good college, and it's so mentally draining that I can't stay in contact with this woman anymore. And so I cut it off. I think she tried to contact me one last time, and I didn't even answer her. I just like deleted the app and was like, I'm going no contact with her. And the research lady, I think she contacted us one time being like, do you want to continue conversation? And I think we just ghosted all of them. I think just so they wouldn't try to come back into our lives. So yeah, I am in no contact with any of my biological family.
So fair. It sounds like such an emotionally charged and emotionally draining environment to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it was also hard because it's like you missed everything with my life. Like I think the only things that like you haven't seen is me walk across stage for high school or walk across the stage for college. But it's just too late to come back into my life. You missed all of the very big milestones that like growing up, your parents want to see you do. They want to see you do your first steps. They want to see you graduate high school. They want to see you, when you're really sick and stuff. And she just missed all of those moments in my life that I think I was also just like, there's no point in her in my life anymore anyways. Cause it's like, I'm going to be an adult soon. Like there's no reasons why I should be in contact with her. And maybe in another lifetime it would have worked out better. But I think that I also had so much, I feel like hatred is such a strong word, but I think I had so much hatred towards the situation that it also changed my perspective on my biological mom. And I think that also changed the ambush and everything. I think all impacted me on, I just don't want to have a relationship with this woman. And I think that she continued also to say like, I love you, and like, I hope you can call me mom one day, and stuff like that. And so it's just like, it was all overwhelming. And I think the piling all of that up together was just like, I don't want to be in contact with this woman anymore. That I think really changed. Yeah.
It's completely understandable. And it feels like there's a big difference between the words she's saying and her actions and how she's making you feel. Like, it's one thing saying, oh, like, call me mum, like, I love you. But then you're not acting like you want to be a mum. You're not showing up, and you're actually making your daughter act like the parent. So that sounds, from an outsider's point of view, it sounds really jarring.
No, I think that like through the entire situation, I told my mom like, I feel like the parent in the situation, and I like remember having some conversations with my mom about it. And I think it was interesting to also hear my mom's point of view from a mother's side, and she was also trying to understand where my biological mom was coming from. And she was talking to me like about a mother's love, and that like it doesn't go away, and that like to try to see her side of the entire story. And it definitely helped me understand the perspective. Do I fully understand? No, I don't think I ever will. But I think that's the same thing as goes to, she'll never know how I felt, and she'll never know how I feel about it, because the level of immaturity and like the maturity level is just not there. I think that I would never be able to have a deep level conversation about what she put me through. Just because, I mean, on the first day, she cried when she first saw me. So I think then if I'm like, let me tell you about me being bullied, or people going up to me, being nosy, and, the stares and stuff about being adopted, I just don't think she would be able to handle it. And I think she would just become hysterical, which then would put me in a situation where I would have to be the mom, and I would have to be the parent and the grown up, and being like de-escalating the situation and not putting my feelings first.
Would you feel like you'd have to very much sort of tiptoe around her and tread on eggshells just for fear of her reactions?
I mean, totally. I think that throughout my entire time I was talking to her, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. Like, I think I one time also said, like, on the app, I think I texted her, like, love you too, or something. And, like, I never meant it. But I think it was just, like, that feeling of, like, she's so sensitive. She's so, like, she needs that. She needs that feeling of, this girl does love me. And I think that I was just like, I said it just like, oh, like I threw it out there, like, love you too. Because I think it was like the end of one of her talks. And she's like, love you too, bye. But like, in all reality, like, I never meant any of those words to her. I think I'm also very hard on my biological family, but it comes from a side that I don't think unless you're adopted, I don't think you fully understand why it's so harsh. Because I also know that like through my friends and family, like I also got asked like, you're being really harsh on them, like they're trying and stuff. And I think that if you weren't adopted, I don't think you truly understand how it feels, and to also like navigate through that. So I think that like my harshness doesn't come from I'm being mean. I think it just comes from the situation itself, and that like what their actions did to me that caused my harshness towards them. And so I don't think that like unless you're adopted, like I said, I don't think you would fully understand.
There's so much nuance, and there's so much that you've gone through that no one else will ever understand. And also, multiple things can be true at once. Of course, you can appreciate the fact they're doing their best, but if that best is making you feel overwhelmed and like you're responsible for their feelings, it doesn't make it okay. Just because they're trying doesn't make it okay to then treat you the way you've been treated. And I think oftentimes, people miss the fact that 2, 3, 4 things can be true at once. It's not just, oh, they made the effort, great, perfect, good for them. That then negates any negative feelings you might have. It's like, no, you're a human being who's gone through a very human experience. You're allowed to feel however you need to feel around it.
Yeah.
And I hope you had the support around you to navigate it. It sounds like your parents have been amazing.
No, I mean, they threw that out the entire process. They were really supportive. And my mom was always there on all the calls. And she was always there to talk to me about it. One of my favorite things growing up in high school was, I can't at least do it now because I'm gluten-free, But whenever like it was a very overwhelming time, my mom and I would do like a late night drive, and we would get Raising Cane's, and like we would just talk about the situation, or we would just hang out. Or I remember that there were other times that was just like a very overwhelming situation, and we would our to go show always will movie will always be Dirty Dancing, and we would watch that, and we would watch like those type of movies just to kind of just to settle down and just to relax. And I like those moments, always will be some of my favorite moments growing up. And I think that also just goes back to the idea that like that biological mom would never be able to do, and she never did any of that to like comfort me in any way. As to my mom, she was there to comfort me, and she was there to support me and be there for me in every situation. So I think that just like also like I was never able to say mom to my biological mom just because my mom is with me right now. Like she didn't leave me. She didn't treat me like the parent, and it has never made me feel that way.
Absolutely. Do you have any feelings towards your biological mother now?
I think it's just like I've come to content with my story. I think that I know now, my actual birthday. I know my origins, I guess, and there's no ill intent towards her, but there's also no like I guess good feelings. It's just kind of like in the middle of like I've come to terms. Um, every now and then I'm just like I wonder how she's doing, and then there's also a part of me that wishes I never did it. Just because it was a very unique situation to navigate that through high school. I think that it also came with good and also bad feelings. And so I think that like at this point, if I could go back, I don't think I would get in touch with them. I think it was like the unknown was so like it was just so interesting for me to figure out because it was like I didn't know any of my past, and so I was so like intrigued by it that I think that was the reason why I was so pulled into the idea of wanting to know more. If I could go back, I think that it would like to my younger self. I guess I would tell me like it's okay to not know. And it goes back to my college essay because I talked about like, mother is a verb, and I also talked about like, I am more than my adoption story. And I think it took me years to realize that I am more than that. Um, and I think that like, it's okay not to know everything. Like I know a lot of adopted kids that don't know anything. And so when I tell them my story, they're like, oh my God, like that is intense. Like, how do you feel about it? So it's just because I know that also a lot of adopted kids, they'll never get that moment. They'll never get the first one-on-one conversation with their biological parents or know what actually happened. Um, so I think it's so unique, but I think that going back, I don't think I would go forward with the communicating towards my biological family.
That's really interesting. And are there any kind of I've pretty much covered them all already, but are there any kind of key takeaways that you have from that whole experience?
I think it's just like knowing yourself and knowing your limits and knowing your boundaries. I think I had to put so many new boundaries that I just, in normal day-to-day situations would never come up. And so just knowing your boundaries, I think I had to set a lot with this biological family, and knowing it's okay to say no, and it's okay to not talk to them at points. I mean, there were times that like when I first started the communicating towards my biological family, my mom's like, just don't answer them if you don't want to. Like, you don't have to. You don't owe them anything. And I was like, you're so right though. Like, I don't owe them anything. And so there were times that like they would text me and I didn't answer them for like a day or two. And then like I guess maybe some could say like, oh, well then you also ghosted your family. When I ghosted them, it was like 1 or 2 days. When my biological mom was ghosting me through that time of communicating, it was months on end. And so like I think it's okay to have 1 or 2 days where you need to take a step back and stuff. But it was like I would hear from her and it was like 2 months later, or I would hear from her and it's like 3 weeks later. I never did that to any point of the time that I was communicating with her. It was like maybe 1 or 2 days just to breathe because I was a full-time student. So I didn't have always time to just text and be like, hey, so just like setting boundaries, and I guess again, like I said, knowing yourself and knowing that it's okay to like say no or like taking a step back when you need to.
That's really important advice for people, I think, and it's a really important learning from the whole thing. I'm glad that's what you were able to take away. Also, I know you said that, you could have been perceived to be ghosting your mum for a couple of days. Like, I don't reply to some of my best friends for weeks. So a couple of days is so fine.
Yeah.
And then there's also the nuance that you didn't abandon your mother. She was the one who left you. So then to ghost you and then be hot and cold with comms, that's so hurtful. And like, my heart really goes out to you because I can't imagine how that must have felt.
I mean, I think it's just, again, ironic of like the idea that you're the one that actually wanted to search for me in the first place, and you don't have the decency to want to continue reaching out. Because I think it's not my job to be the one reaching out. You were the one that wanted to have this relationship. You were the one that said in your letter that you wanted to form a relationship, that one day I could call you mom. So I never felt the need or want to be the one that was putting in the effort of, okay, fine, I will be the one communicating. I will be the one texting you. And I think, again, it goes back to the idea that you're the parent in the situation. Like, get a grip. Like, get a hold of yourself and act like the parent. If you wanted a relationship with me, then you should be the one taking the time, putting the effort in talking to me, not the other way around.
I think it's so great that you were able to set those boundaries and know what you will and won't stand for and ultimately protect yourself. And to anyone else who's potentially looking or thinking of looking for their birth parents, is there anything you'd say to them?
I definitely agree now, going back to it, like with my parents, that like I think when you're 18, I think that's the perfect time to do it. I think that I'm very grateful for my parents for letting me do it at such a young age, but I think 18 is such a good number to do it. I think that, you're about to go to college. I think that you're an adult at that point. You can navigate your feelings a lot better. And I think that 18 is just such a time that you know more about yourself and you know what is okay and what isn't. And so I guess, like, going back, and I guess my advice to other adoptees or who wants to reach out to their birth parents, it's like, hold off on it, because I think there's so many emotions going through it that I think it's important to just wait and really truly think about it before you do it. As well as also, like, I guess towards the parents that have kids wanting to do it, get them a therapist. My parents got me a therapist. Just because it's such a unique situation to be going through, I think it's really important to have someone that's not their friends, not their family or significant other, to talk to them about it. Because again, it's not like every day that a biological family reaches out, or the vice versa. And so I think that those type of feelings are so unique that I don't think even your parents could be able to handle. So I think getting professional help is very important. I think that's like one of my like biggest things I can't emphasize enough, is like get professional help, get a therapist. It's okay if it's not consistent. I know I wasn't consistent with my therapy during that time, but just having someone to rant to or to talk to about what's going on and what's going on through those communicating times is so important, because it just makes sure that your mental health is a priority and make sure that you're okay. Because at the end of the day, like, the kid should be the kid, and the kid is not the one to blame. And I think that, like, growing up, I also told my mom, like, I was like, what's wrong with me, or like, why did I get abandoned? And so it's like to emphasize more on, like, you're not the issue, you were never the problem. So I think just having an outside person to rant and to hear your story and to tell you that you're not the problem, or to tell you that, it's going to be okay, I think it's really important to have.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for joining me and for being so open and honest about your story. I truly appreciate it and have really loved chatting.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so grateful to Sophie for sharing her story so candidly. And one thing that struck me was the reminder that finding your birth family isn't necessarily the finish line. It's the start of navigating new relationships, emotions, and learning a lot more about yourself. I also love that, although Sophie's experience wasn't smooth sailing, she doesn't discourage other adoptees from finding their birth parents, as everyone's experiences would just be so different. It was lovely to hear that she had such supportive parents by her side, and that they got her the support she needed to navigate the complexities of reunion. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to share it, follow the show, or find us on Instagram and TikTok at Not Made in China Podcast. We post new episodes every other Tuesday. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.